I'm joined by the European Union ambassador to Zimbabwe, Jobst Von Kirchmann. Did I get that right?
That's perfect.
You know how much we were practicing. But something big is happening, especially tomorrow in terms of Europe. Maybe let's start there, but where are my manners? Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Getting ahead of myself. Obviously, something big happening tomorrow from a European perspective.
Tomorrow we are celebrating the 9th of May, which is Europe Day, and that we do annually. I will later say what we also do specifically tomorrow, but let me say a couple of words about the 9th of May.
Yeah, all right.
Because people sometimes ask me, why is the 9th of May you're celebrating Europe Day?
Yeah.
Like we go 70 years back, more than 70 years, to the 9th of May 1950.
Okay.
If you look at the European history, that was just a couple of years after a big war, the Second World War, where 75 million people lost their lives. 75 million.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. Yeah. Imagine that. This is like 5 times the population of Zimbabwe, roughly.
Yeah.
And at that moment, those countries at that time fighting against each other were sitting together and were saying, we would like to work together. And we would like to give up some sovereignty so that we can, in the future, have a peaceful life. And I think that laid the foundation for the European Union as you know it today with 27 member states. And that's also the reason why we got the Peace Nobel Prize in 2012.
All right.
For exactly that, because if you look further back in history, we had like centuries of wars. Second World War, First World War, and so on and so on. And all of a sudden that ended. And since then we have 70 years of prosperity and peace. And I think that's a fantastic success story, and that's the reason why we celebrate this every year.
All right, and obviously specifically zoning in on the celebrations tomorrow from a Zimbabwean perspective, what is the EU doing tomorrow to mark this day that obviously has huge significance to the EU?
Now, tomorrow, I think it's 2 things. It's on one hand, showing what the EU is. Sometimes people are asking me, 27 member states, what is that? And I think it's a moment where we can basically show what is the EU. That's the first moment. So all the EU ambassadors are there, all the honorary consuls. We are in total, tomorrow, 16 out of the 27 member states will be there. And we can basically show what the EU is. And then on the other hand, I think it's also the moment to say, what are we doing in Zimbabwe? And in Zimbabwe tomorrow, we are launching our Global Gateway campaign, which will be under the theme Silani Tinemi EU with you. Yep. Silani Tinemi EU with you.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So it's the European Union currently works together with the government in projects for over 600 million euros. 600
million money,
euros, yeah. And this is essentially in several areas. In particular, we do, for example, the rehabilitation of the Kariba Dam. But we have also 2 very big initiatives, which we call Team Europe initiatives, together with our member states. One on gender equality and women empowerment, and I just learned your previous guest is an example of women empowerment. Yeah, and I think we have a lot in common with Zimbabwe and with the policy of Zimbabwe to work together on that field. And the other one is greener and climate smart agriculture. Both initiatives well over $250 million. Greener and climate smart agriculture, I think, is a top topic. If you look at the drought, only 60 million are going in drought mitigation now in our support. And I think these are areas where we work fantastically together, and we would like to showcase that tomorrow.
Right. No, as you talk about that, you talk about the 600 million, the 250 million, the project that you're working on. What would you say is the current state or the current health of the relationship between the European Union specifically and Zimbabwe? Do you think it's in a good space? Do you think maybe there's room for improvement, or you're just like, no, it's perfect, we're happy?
You can improve everything in your life. I would say we are currently in a phase of constructive re-engagement from both sides. You have perhaps followed that we had a fantastic big stand on ZTN on the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair in Bulawayo last week. We won the first prize. And that shows also the commitment of the European Union in terms of trade and investment. Not many people know actually that the European Union has a free trade agreement with Zimbabwe. So what does it mean for a company? For a company, it means
just quickly unpack that for
any
us.
Zimbabwean company can actually export any product or service to the EU duty and tariff free.
Okay.
Yeah, you see, and many people react surprised like you. Zimbabwean companies can import from the EU machinery, packaging material, duty and tariff free. So that's a fantastic opportunity, and we believe, and that's also the reason why we had been in Bulawayo, that there's room for doing much more. We are the fourth biggest trading partner with 700 million euros per year, but I think we could be much bigger. Yeah, so I think we are in a phase where we look into more investment, more trade, and a lot of cooperation in different areas with the government.
I know we talked a bit about maybe the trade side, but I know you did highlight about empowerment and gender-based violence. Maybe just unpack what you guys are doing in terms of the Spotlight Initiative as well?
So the European Union funded the Spotlight Initiative, but it came to an end. And we were saying in Zimbabwe, His Excellency the President had actually endorsed the compact against gender-based violence. It's the only country in the world, the only president who did that. Yeah. So we said there's a lot of fertile ground to work together on gender equality and women empowerment. And that's why the European Union, together with all the member states, we say we put more money, over, as I said, over $250 million. We put into an initiative for the coming years to help women to be part of decision-making process, to empower them, to set up livelihoods, to have better working conditions, etc. And I think we work perfectly together because that is in line with what we have as well in the National Development Strategy 1.
But obviously tomorrow, Europe Day, so I'm going to say Happy Europe Day ahead of tomorrow. And you did say that there is an opportunity for people to learn about the EU and what it does, and maybe even the relationship between the EU and Zimbabwe. But before I let you go, maybe just as a teaser, maybe you can just tell us something that people might, you've already told me about that, free trade between the EU and Zimbabwe, maybe something else that people might not necessarily know about the dynamic that exists between the EU in specific reference to Zimbabwe.
Now, first of all, I think the EU, people often do not know what the EU is. Let me start with that. Yeah? So we are more than 450 million people. Yeah. We have one of the largest economies in the world with around 16.5 trillion US dollar. So it's huge. We are the biggest trading bloc in the world. So there's no bigger trading bloc in the world than the European Union. And I think that obviously has implications also in our work with Zimbabwe, because we are, for example, the biggest buyer of horticulture products. Yeah, over 40% of all horticulture goes to the EU. So I think we would like to showcase that. We would like to showcase that we are a partner and we are together with Zimbabwe. And that's why tomorrow we launch our campaign as well, which I said is Silani, Tinemi, EU with you.
Yeah, we're together. Yeah.
And that obviously we do with a lot of cultural entertainment, because we are also very active in that field. And we bring in a lot of these talented young artists coming tomorrow and showcasing the young talent in culture of Zimbabwe.
I just felt like you did mention about the global gateway. Maybe if we can just give us a little bit more around that, so that I know you did say maybe it might be a bit too heavy, but just for people to get an understanding of what that is and how we can...
So the EU, at a global scale, says we would like to be a partner for connectivity, virtually or not, but sustainable projects. And what does it mean? It means we made available over $300 billion worldwide, roughly half of it for Africa. And then in each country, we look for projects where we can find a common understanding. I mentioned one, which is the Kariba Dam. Yeah. The Kariba Dam, why we are the biggest donor in that in Global Gateway? It's very simple, because it's hydropower. It fits very well with our own values. It corresponds to what Zimbabwe wants to do in energy production, be more on renewables. So I think we have a perfect understanding. And then the Kariba Dam, if it's not rehabilitated, would be a major danger for 5 million people. So I think being the main partner for that is a fantastic undertaking. We do the same in health, in education, and in other areas. But I think that's what we want. We want to be a partner which shows that a sustainable approach is the best approach. Because if you talk about environment, for example, You cannot solve issues at a country level. Neither we can at a European level, nor other countries can. So I think we have to work all together in order to unleash that power of really changing something on climate change, saving the planet and so on.
I know that seems to be a big area of concern and focus for the EU. I know Zimbabwe went through an El Nino, a bit of a drought. Is there anything that's happening in terms of the relationship between the EU and Zimbabwe and support around that?
Yeah, we are making currently available over 60 million for drought mitigation. What does it mean in practical terms? If there is no water, because El Nino basically led to a drought, then farmers often who have, for example, cultivated maize, they have no crops at the end. So we are helping a lot of farmers in getting drought-resistant crops, which are indigenous crops, by the way. We support them in feeding livestock in a different way to make livestock survive during a drought. We help them if there's no water, for example, keeping the moisture which is in the morning, coming in the morning when it's cold like today, keeping it on a field and to a certain extent allowing humidity on the field. There are plenty of techniques and we have done a lot of research, and I think in that we can be a very good partner for farmers in Zimbabwe to help partially to mitigate the risks. And that's what we want.
And before I let you go, maybe you can just look directly to our viewers, your final word to Zimbabweans, especially ahead of Europe Day tomorrow.
It's very simple. It's Silani, Tinemi, EU with you.
All right, Jobst Von Kirchmann there. Thank you very much, the EU Ambassador to Zimbabwe, for joining us and making time this morning. I'll try and make my way to to come and be part of the celebration. It seems like there's so many fascinating things that are happening between the EU and Zimbabwe and what you guys are doing in this country. So thank you for making time with us this morning.
Thanks a lot, Tich. It was a real pleasure.
All right,
thank you.
Konapo, ipapo pa ZTN Prime, DSTV channel 294, the place to be.